Good, hello, welcome back to Onion Skin. You remember this thing? I was rebuilding a Cronenberg rig in Toon Boom. This is a time-lapse recreation of that thing. I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. So first of all, took an original image. I'm just going to be tracing it over flat. I could have been working smarter than this by predetermining the layers that I would therefore be drawing into, but I didn't really want to think about it too hard yet, so no shame in just drawing it flat. The main thing to point out at this stage of the drawing is the type of pencil. This is indeed using Toon Boom's pencil tool. The pressure sensitivity is completely turned off. Its minimum value is the same as the widest. I've set it to a level of 3. That seems to be, as similar as I can get it to what Rick and Morty tends to use, as they also have a line with no pressure sensitivity and rounded caps on either end. Those eyes, you may have noticed, are quite unusual compared to literally every other show ever made, that they're just sort of squiggly, so just little dashes making a star shape with the pencil tool pulls that off just fine. Now remember, the big advantage of using the pencil tool is that it's made out of a stroke, not a fill. So this means its line thickness can be changed in post at literally any time. It will also be able to change itself depending on zoom level to the character, so things can thicken up a little bit if they're way off in the distance, so the style doesn't inherently just break and become very clear that it's made out of rigs and parts. Anyway, now that most of the character has been drawn, things like the tentacles and that I'm just throwing in on a layer behind, but when it gets down to the nitty gritty, I will be creating just a whole bunch of blank layers, tons and tons and tons of them, and slowly working up, trimming away the body parts from each one, leaving only the one I need. This part's quite interesting, the backpack. So notice that I'm deliberately overlapping every single line here, just to try and keep the lines as straight as possible. I then use the cutter tool, the one underneath the black arrow, and change its cutting mode in tool properties so it's the rounded cap end. Then simply swiping through every single type of stroke will trim it down to the shape that I want. Very handy, very quick to do. So now I'm starting to create more layers and naming them accordingly. And each layer is going to be, filled in the back. So any potential thing that could be seen is going to be covered up. I'm looking very carefully to see what each of the layers should be. On the other monitor, I have the original animation and I'm constantly flicking back and forth frame by frame to try and see as clearly as I can where the layers are lying, which one is separate to another. It seems quite clear that there's feet, there's knees, there's thighs, the whole front arm was one big layer, the mouths are in fact a shared layer, all of the eyes are working independently because they all blink on their own. I'm now going through and making the palette as well. This is a relatively straightforward process, just creating tons and tons of swatches, going through and opening up each one at a time and selecting from the imported bitmap image and naming them accordingly. It's important that such a file will stay organized because there are so many different types of fleshy bits. Some layers have to be a bit more careful than others when trimming them away to make sure that things are complete. Some will be filled in with a solid line, others using the invisible stroke tool if it's going to be overlapping on the topmost layer. Once each one has been laid out, going through and removing the unwanted parts and filling it in, it's quite a therapeutic process in my opinion. Now I'm just trying to figure out how large should the main central body be. There's a lot of guesswork involved, bit of trial and error. But I think I've got it. All the fleshy, spotty bits, all of those are outlined with the invisible stroke tool once again. This will allow me to easily paint bucket it when we get round to that stage, but I don't have to worry about having unwanted lines and stroke work. For some of these circular ones on the back of the tentacles, if I hold down the command key, that actually creates a connected loop for every stroke that I do. Give it a try, you'll notice that it is good for circles and things like that. It means you're not going to get any strange gaps that the paint bucket will misbehave during. More fleshy spots on the head, once again with the stroke tool, and I can finally start paint bucketing them in. However, I'm going to be removing all of the facial elements. Eyes and things will of course be sitting on top, but most of the fat folds, they can remain, on the most part. The arm getting the same treatment. Stroke tool to put in the detail, filled with color, based on the palette made previously. I've taken a whole bunch of duplicates of what is remaining of the body, naming them each after all of the eyes, 1 through 7, and deleting all of the junk, leaving just one eye behind for each of those 7 layers. So as you may have noticed, layer prep is probably the most important stage of this. It takes a while, but if you think it through, you'll save yourself a lot of strife. Okay, now we get into colored strokes. So there's some sections, the fat rolls and the veins and things like that, if you look real closely on the original, they aren't a solid black outline, so they get given a bit of a tint. Also using strokes on the edge of the mouth to be able to fill that in with the regular flesh color. So if the mouth happens to overlap off the edge of the body, which Rick and Morty mouths often tend to do, I'm not going to run into any weird surprises. The separation and coloring process is nearly complete. It's very important that everything is named correctly so that I can easily shuffle the layers about into their correct order and hierarchy without becoming too confused, as the layers are most certainly to be drawn in a different order to how I'm going to eventually have them end up being, as the layers will almost certainly need to end up being in a different order to how I drew them. Now comes all of the node work. This is all the Harmony Premium stuff. Here they are. I've just spread them all out and we can see all of the layers as they currently sit. The first objective is building up the mouth, probably my favorite part. This is a series of apply peg transformations, each with a peg slapped into the leftmost port. What this does is there's one mouth layer at the top here, and that it's original. The other three can all be moved to independent locations, but because they're all sourcing the same artwork, it means they're always going to animate exactly the same way. I'm separating out each of the eyes and putting them into their own composite so they can all exist together as a bit of a group. The composite will compress all the threads into one, so if I apply an effect to them, for example, it will do it to all of the eyes at once, and I only need to worry about updating one of the effects and it will be applied to all of them. For elements such as these tentacles, they're going to be rigged with curve deformation bones. They're a Bezier curve type bone, so just after selecting it with the free transform tool, I can select the build bones tool. It's up in the top section there. It's a bit of a hammer and spanner thing, and just clicking and dragging down the tentacles, I can start building up a shape following along with the drawing. Once they're manipulated with the free transform tool, they will be animatable. As you can see happening with the body here, they use regular bones. So it's got that big circle in the middle, that's a hinge, that's a joint. So it will pivot and contort the vector art around that point. Whereas the tentacles can be a little bit more flowy and bent and manipulated and stuff. Over in the node view once again, it likes to automatically group bones away. I often like to unpack them again just so I can get a very clear vision of what is happening throughout the hierarchies. So those dark green ones, they represent bones. They work their way down the chain connected to the artwork of whatever they have. Now you can see a whole bunch of the threads are coming out of a dark green one and connecting to different points. This is connecting all of the different elements to the main body piece, the secondary bone of that main body piece. So the arms, tentacles, facial elements, they all need to follow along with the main body whenever it moves left and right. Hence, they all get connected to that secondary bone. And of course, test, test, test. I keep moving parts around just to make sure nothing unusual is happening and nothing contorts in strange ways, which is quite common. Another bone type that is existing out in the field, it's highlighted there and connecting to many other bones, is called a kinematic output. This is available in all three versions of the software, and it allows you to connect elements to a piece of bone so it will follow along, but it will not be contorted and stretched and bent by it. So things like, say, the tentacles, for example, I will probably want to be able to follow along with the bone, but I don't want to be seeing them stretching bigger and smaller because of the influence of something else, yeah? So I'm getting down to the nitty-gritties of the legs now, trying to figure out how the artwork should behave and all the layers spent up on top of each other. Shifting some of their thread order around so I can see how they sit at different layers. Of course, the pivot points, they are important as well. Using the free transform tool, or what I prefer, the advanced animation tools up in the very top left there, they have a more true pivot. So once that is moved into place with the rotation tool, I should never have to worry about it again. It will rotate from that point. It will work as a proper hinge. It is good. So I'm sorting out some issues here. You can see how the artwork overlaps over the top of the knees. So I'm going back in, just trimming artwork away, building it up in other parts, connecting it together with stroke tools so that as much can be shown correctly at any given time without it coming across as obviously layered. Everything that's left, I've grouped into a master peg, disconnected things I don't want to be connected there, such as a the background or the source material. This will pack the entire character together into one main piece, which I can drag around. Tying up loose ends now, there was an eye underneath this knee, which I wasn't happy with. It was very squashed in. So I'm going to draw in a nice big new one that is going to exist on its own layer above the knee itself. So when I come to animating its blink, that will be easy to do. You'll notice I've also traced very accurately along that flap. If I was being very ambitious, I could have set up a series of masking systems, so I could just have a full eye there. But because it's such a simple piece, it's not the focal element of the shot, and it's only going to need about 2 or 3 frames to execute a blink. Frankly, it was just faster to draw it along that line. Now it's time to really get to work. Building mouth states. I've taken samples of different mouth states that exist within the show and I'm trying to replicate them here. I'm gonna need a handful of them, probably 4 or 5 different mouths, so that when I cycle through an animation later, it'll look as if he's speaking, not giving it any dialogue, but I thought it would be important to have to at least demonstrate how the mirrored mouths all function as a unit. An error's been accounted. Did you see that mouth was moving in the wrong direction when the body was tilted? So I'm going to have to reorder the strings of the mouth components so that they all behave correctly. So first I'm just deconnecting it, so it will just sort of sit flat. I think that might actually work. I could get away with leaving it like that. Yeah. I think I'll just leave it like that. Now I come to animating each of the eyes, taking a close look at what exists in the show currently, and there appears to be 3 different frames to create a blink. Open, shut, and a single in between that is about a 3/4 open state. Relatively simple to do. The process is now to repeat that across all of the many eyes. All of them will be animated along the same frames, so have a look down in the timeline there. You can see that they are all in line, so I can test them all simultaneously. With all of the blinks done, I spread out their exposure to 2, and then have the eyes be shut for 3, paste in the half open for 2 again, and then leave them back open. So this creates a full blink which I can copy and paste and recycle at any time. Working down each of the layers, shifting them all down a few frames each, so it creates a nice cycle of individually blinking eyes. To simulate Rick talking, I can take all of the mouths that I drew, open up the X-Sheet view, find his mouth layer, selecting all of the cells going down, this represents all of the frames, right click, go to exposure, and click fill cells randomly. This will take each of the individual drawings that I've done and just randomly distribute them down the entire thing. So now I get a nice pretend speak. This is as far as I got, which was good for the demonstration in the Read Between the Frames episode about Rick and Morty. Give it a look if you haven't. How did you miss it? But the rig is done and ready to be used. Thanks for coming by. I hope you learned something about rigged animation inside of Toon Boom Harmony. If you'd like to know more about it, I have a very in-depth tutorial series about building and animating one of these things. Have a look at this annotation in the top right. That's a playlist of those videos. They may be quite useful. And the one on the bottom right, that's more Read Between the Frames. So take care. See ya.